Cyril invited me here. I'm super glad to come talk to you guys a little bit. First, my kids asked me out the door, what am I doing? I said, I'm dressed. I said, are you going to work? I said, no. I said, I'm going to a conference, and that didn't really sit with them well. I didn't know what that was. So I guess it's more like teaching. And I'm going to take a picture of you all. Just like, oh, no, but you're not smiling. Yeah, so these are great devices. You can use them anywhere. You can text more than you can take actually cell phone calls. But you know, I'm thrilled to kind of just give you some of my experiences that I've had and just talk to you a little bit. I think you know, anyone here who's been on a trip or hasn't been on a trip, I think all this stuff is good information. It's a little less detailed, a little less medical. It's a little more trip organization. How do you handle obstacles? Hopefully, what you can take away with it is just some of the pearls that I've learned just from a couple trips that I've taken. That sometimes we hit with some things that are unexpected, and you got to be able to get through them. And usually, whatever you plan is not how it's going to end up going. It's going to be a little bit different. So I got to do this just to make sure I'm totally in line with all the CME stuff. So CME disclosure, I have no relevant financial relationships to disclose. So have any of you been on a trip? Have most of you been on a trip? Have any of you not been on a trip? Some of you might not have been on a trip. Some of you might be going on a trip. You know, some of you might be going this month, next month, in a year. You're thinking about going on one. This talk's really geared to anyone who's thinking about taking their healthcare work international, because I think you all have some wanderlust, some desire to go out in the world and see how medicine's practiced elsewhere, see how other people treat people, sort of get an exposure to culture that maybe you don't get in the United States. And so, for that, I think there's at least a shared passion amongst all of you that one connects to, and I think it's great that you get to meet in this kind of conference, talk, network, figure out who's going on what trip, or because ultimately it's who you meet, how you get introduced to these trips, and who you bounce into, and what opportunities you take. And one of the things that you do find is that you never think there's a right time to go on a trip. You never think there's enough money. You never know if there's someone watching the kids. You never think there's your schedule perfectly planned out. I think it's a lot like children. It's hard to say that it's the right time to have them. You just have them and sort of deal with it afterwards. They're wonderful gifts, and you just learn how awesome they are once you have them. But I think the same thing with a mission trip. Right at this point in my life, I would say you just book it and you go, and you just sort of deal with it. And so why should you listen? Yeah, I'm 36 years old. I'm not that old. I've only been on a few trips. Done some work across the border. Some of you might be more advanced. Some of you may not. Some of you are still green and maybe haven't been on a trip yet. But I think I was pretty nervous when I went on my first trip, or did my first mission work. And you try and sort of figure out how are you going to align what you practice in the United States, or how are you going to practice in some place that doesn't have any resources, or the people don't speak the same language, or their culture is totally different than yours. And so, I think you can benefit from someone at least just talking about some of their experiences. Maybe it's going to be in line with what you've experienced already. Some of you may say, this is totally new, this is great. But I was nervous, and you just have to sort of just go in your first one, get your feet wet, and figure it out. But you then tend to realize that most people are thankful, most people are caring. People have all sorts of weird diseases, and in the end, there's a lot to be learned from going on international trips. And even if the medical side doesn't work out, you don't have the right supplies there, or you're missing something, or just being down there, reassuring people, caring for them, tends to be one of the best parts of it. So, if anyone says, oh, I don't think I've had enough experience, I don't think I know enough, I'm not an OR PA, I'm not a ERPA, I haven't done this much. There's a zillion things to be done on a trip. And actually, I just went to a dinner 2 nights ago with an organization called His Healing Hands. And they go to all over the world, Indonesia, Rwanda. And one of the best lines this guy had was, ultimately, you're sometimes practicing medicine in the 1920s or the 1800s, where there's not a lot of medicine. You may not have all the things you need. And some of the things that you learn in being a PA, a nurse, a doctor, is that you learn how to care for people, reassure them, and tell them, hey, it's going to be okay. This may not be so bad. And that's one of the art forms of just being in healthcare and medicine, that you can reassure these people, and they're just thankful that you're coming down there to see them. But some of the organizations that I've been around with is 1 Billion Thirsty is they dig wells, and I think we're talking about global health, and I'm from Kaiser, so we're all about preventative medicine, and one of the biggest problems is water, right? So I don't think necessarily everything has to be a medical trip, but if you are interested, I think water tends to be the biggest cause of most of the diseases that you'll see. You get infections, poor health, kids that have infections or spiking fevers, you want fluids for sepsis. Fluids tends to fix everything. It seems like in the United States, fluids are really good. I think they're really great things for down in foreign countries. But if they had clean water, you'd see probably a lot less illness. Centro Shalom, that's what Cyril was talking about. This is the medical clinic down in Tijuana. It sort of started out as a TARP, and we used to just bring medicine down there and just do a grab bag and hand it out to whoever. And it sort of was disorganized. It's through sponsors and donors. We've since built a clinic down there. It's got enough to see 2 patients in a room, and we also have a dental clinic with x-rays. And what we have down there is a lot of healthcare trips about once every quarter, but people from around Southern California all go down there. So it's probably used about once every 2 weeks, once every month maybe. So it's serving a good population of people in the barrio down there. International Humanitarian Aid Foundation, this was a group that I went down to Haiti with the earthquake. For His Glory Outreach, this was an orphanage that we did a medical mission trip to. So your trips may vary from where you go for location. Maybe an orphanage, maybe a disaster relief trip. It may be a clinic that you're working at on a more regular basis. And Heartline Ministries was another organization who I had a chance to end up at their clinic. And we'll get, this is a crazy story, but ended up in their clinic during the earthquake as well. And they were doing some really good stuff with a women's center that they turned into a trauma center for the earthquake. So just some experience. Why go international? You guys probably all know this. Most people, see the world like this. This is your land area map. It's 1-to-1. Everyone's got equal parts land area. And everything looks the way it should. But say you put on these special glasses and you saw the world through different glasses. And it just happens to be worldmapper.org. That's a website. But you can look through these glasses and say, okay, how does the world truly look for certain things? Let's take human poverty. So you look at the world and you say to yourself, well, this doesn't look anything like the land area. If you look here, India, and this is early childhood death. This includes clean water. It includes financial resources. So poverty is sort of a collection of a whole bunch of things. It's not just who's got more in their pocket, who's got less in their bank account. It's a whole bunch of stuff. But you can see we're here. We had a pretty big landmass, but now we're just sort of a little puddle up there. And Africa's huge, and sort of some places over here in Asia and Indonesia. And so, I think a lot of the lectures have been sort of talking about these other areas because they're in need, because that's where doctors are, and healthcare workers they're not there. So they need people to go to these places. Well, if you look at his spending, let's look at the other way. Say you're in the glass half full instead of glass half empty. Well, look, where's the glass full? We spend a lot on healthcare spending. This is actually public spending. This doesn't even include private spending, which is probably more than public spending in the United States. But Europe, a lot of socialized medicine there. And you can see that there's a lot of spending here. Africa, the countries with the lowest are like Niger, Burkina Faso, places like that. And then, this might be Luxembourg. Luxembourg? Cyril knows it. He used to live in France. It's a small little nation. They have the highest spending per person. So they're probably like this big thing, and their landmass is probably a dot. So you've seen the world through these special glasses. You guys you're all here because you know there's a need. Otherwise, you'd be out on the beach and hanging out. It's a nice day out there, but it's like 73 degrees usually in San Diego. This is a cold day, so usually like around 74, 75. But you know, you're here to talk about going on a global health mission or just serving abroad. And Albert Schweitzer, I'm sure, have you guys heard of this guy before? He's quoted a lot, but I think I think it's reasonable to say that there's a lot of truth into what he says. He spent a lot of time down in Africa, and you know, this is one of my favorite quotes. I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know: the only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. Well, that's sort of the principle of, you know, you feel better helping others. But I think you guys have you already know that going down to these places, you walk away, even though the trip will be hard, difficult, there's mosquitoes that bite you, it's hot, it's cold, whatever, that when you come home, usually is some sort of joy or some sort of happiness that you feel from serving other people. And I think that is an amazing feeling. And it may not be joy while you're down there the whole time. Sometimes the conditions can be pretty rough. So when things don't go right, same guy says, you know, the one who gains strength by overcoming obstacles possesses the only strength which can overcome adversity. That's much the same thing you. You have to go over hurdles to get stronger. You know, your darkest days will make you as strong as you can possibly be. So I think this talk is more about you can plan something and it may go wrong. And I want to help you guys figure out some ways, not all, because I'm sure we all have a collection of different experiences, but how do you get through some changes in your plans? So let's make a plan. Do any of you want to lead a trip, or have you guys ever been put in a position where, I know Cyril's gone to Barefoot Doctors and he's had to lead trips of some of our doctors over there. But if you have any desire to lead trips, or if you're going on a trip, this may help you just to kind of know what to look for in the organization, in the planning of it, and to know that you're going to go on something that's going to be somewhat successful. So what's the objective of the work? You can go on the website and find a zillion different medical mission trips to go on. There are tons of people that go on these trips. And you have to ask yourself, what kind of trip are you looking to get on? 50 to 60% of them are some sort of religious or evangelical trip. So you may find out you intend to go on there, and most of the people are evangelizing. You say, whoa, I want to go on a medical trip. So you got to be careful on what you're going on. If you want to go on a medical trip, you got to look and make sure and talk to the coordinator and say, hey, I'm looking just to do medical stuff. You can go on some of these other trips, like His Healing Hands or these evangelical things. And what happens sometimes is you do the medical stuff and let the other people do the other stuff. So it's not saying you can't go on them, but you should know what you're looking for in a trip, because you may get on a trip and find out this isn't really what I want. So the objective of the work is probably the first thing. You may also say, I didn't know I was doing surgery, and you may not be ready for that. Or you know, you may be a surgeon who said, I didn't know I was just, you know, looking at skin rashes. But now who's on James Hoffman thinking, well, there. Because that's what you see a lot of. And those things, I'm telling you, it's pattern recognition, if you know it. I mean, that's a beautiful talk for going abroad, because you see so many skin diseases. Coordinator, you may be the coordinator. You may have to figure out some stuff yourself, or you may be dealing with the coordinator. And you know, you don't want to be thrown, everything's going to be rosy. If it's not, you want someone that you can trust, someone who's got the resources. It seems that they have the trip well planned, and that the money you're going to spend to go on this trip, or the donation you make to their organization, is going to be worthwhile and it's going to go in the right direction. Interpreter, you know, Google Translate is great, but you really need someone who can speak the language. You're sort of, I don't want to say you're dead in the water, but there's going to be a point where you're just looking at each other and you know what you're saying, I don't know what I'm saying. And then you know, nothing's going to really get accomplished. But I think having an interpreter, you want to know that you're going to have someone down there. And I know on our trips in Haiti, there are a zillion men and women who want to just come up and just start helping. And they'll translate. You could almost take them off the street, but usually it's someone that's known in the organization, so they can get through the security and kind of hang out, and or a known person. Team composition, you know, is it 2 people? Is it 90 people? Is this huge group? Is it going to be, you know, with a surgical team that's doing craniofacial stuff, where you're having, you know, are you going to be part of the anesthesiology team, or are you going to be part of the surgical team? Is it going to be a small team? Maybe, we've gone down with 4 or 5 people. Mexico sometimes can 2 or 3. So depending on what you want, just you got to know who's going to be on your team. Supplies. I would say when you join a trip, a lot of times it's not like a tourism trip where you pay your money, you go on the cruise ship, everything's supplied, all meals and everything seems to be included. All gauze is included, and all sutures are included. It's just most of the trips I've been in, there's been a fair run around of just trying to find supplies to donate and help out. And I think you all have access to some sort of resources. We're going to talk about some resources if you're the coordinator of the trip, or where you're going to get medicine from. That tends to be a big issue. Where are you going to get medicine from? You can't just take it from the pharmacy. But I know at Kaiser we tried to get medicine for the earthquake, and they said no. So they didn't want to give out expired meds. They didn't have much to give out. It was a little disappointment, but I think there's probably a lot of legal ramifications, with travel and meds and stuff like that. There's much better organizations to get medicine from than probably the hospital you work at. It's better maybe to use one of these organizations that give you and donate meds for free. They work with the government to give you a stamp so that if you want, you can get it through customs. If you land there and you say, what's in this bag? Drugs. And you're not supposed to call them drugs, call them medication. Say drugs, you might get in trouble. Transportation, we'll talk about that a little bit. The flight down there, you may be on a really nice jet going down there. You may be on a helicopter. You might be on a plane. You might be driving down there. You want to kind of know, what's your transportation going to be like. Accommodations, this all sounds like a travel trip in a way. Accommodations, sometimes it'll be in a tent, sometimes it'll be in a hotel, sometimes it'll be sleeping in an orphanage, or you kind of want to know what you're going to be in so you can prepare for that. Also, accommodations, one of the things that you want to take into factor is when you sleep at night, what's going to be sleeping with you? Is it going to be a bug, a snake, a spider? You may need to pack a mosquito net. Cyril loaned me one and never made it back. I think I got you another one.
In my back.
Security. Most of these places are pretty, there may be some sort of strife, some sort of international crisis. If you go to Africa, some of these countries might be more, what's your security going to be like? And, are you just going without security? Does the organization have it? Although it may not be, you don't think of yourself as sort of like the president who needs Secret Service, but when you go to these countries, you kind of feel that way because they do have security for you, and they have guns, and they walk with you, and they follow you around, and they protect you. And you have a detail in a lot of these countries you go to. Now, Mexico, we haven't yet needed a detail there, but the way things seem to be going down there, who knows? Clinic setting, are you going to be in a hospital? Are you going to be working with just an orphanage and or you can just have a tarp out handing out meds. So your setting might be very varied. And then finally the patients, and we'll talk about them. They're what we do this all for. Here's a team that we went down to Haiti. This is right after the earthquake, about 5 days afterwards. And we put this team together. And now Cyril was supposed to be on this team, but our ER wouldn't let 4 people go at the same time. So 3 could go, and Cyril went a week later. And he has some great stories from his trip. And so this is Dr. Minley. He's here in San Diego. Bob Cunningham, there's myself. We're by all the supplies and baggage that came down. So it was about 17 bags. And part of the inspiration for this is that all 3 of us, none of us ended up going to where we wanted to go. And so this mission trip was sort of an interesting trip. And there's a lot of stories that went on in this that changed all of our lives. But we'll talk about that throughout the lecture. And so what could go different? So, I think probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I said what could have gone wrong. I think I've learned that, what happens to you is not really a bad or good. It's really how you react to it and if it helps you. And you'll usually learn from stuff. And at the time that something seems to be going wrong, it may be actually the thing that you needed to have happen to you right at that moment. And it's sounds like fate, and it's one of those things, but I think it's an important concept to learn when you're on these global health trips, because things don't go right. Things don't, you have highs and lows, and we're so accustomed to comfort in the United States that, when things don't seem to work right as we want them, we get frustrated or angry. And so some things might be great, better than expected. Sometimes life is what happens to you while you're busy planning. And for some people, I've heard some great stories about how the trip was so well planned down to the minute detail, but the best parts of the trip happened to be when they met someone. They took them out to a dinner, or they took them out to meet all the police officers in the local village and talk about healthcare or whatever. So I think that's one thing that's worthwhile noting, is that just have that mindset when you're down there. Short-term medical missions, that's usually what we're all going to do, unless any of you are planning to go live down there and be in Africa or some foreign country for a year or two or longer, who knows. But for the most part, you're doing a trip for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, however long. And they call them short-term medical missions. So they're locally organized and usually privately funded. What that means, it's just like anything, you can do whatever you want with the money, right? So this guy at Harvard, he tried to put a paper together to see if these short-term medical missions make any difference, because that's the big question. What's the long-term goal of these things? Do they help? Do they hurt? And does it make any difference? Well, there's really no general scoring scale or some sort of evaluation to say that they do or not. So these are sort of Harvard epidemiologist people. They're trying to figure out a scale to see, after you go on a trip and measure, does it work? Now, that sort of sometimes takes the fun out of it. You kind of want to just go and have fun and treat people and not have to worry about all the metrics and everything else that you have to deal with in healthcare when you get back to the United States. But I guess they are, like everything, getting more scientific in this world on these things. But because it's without restrictions, your trips are usually without restrictions, meaning when you go to these places, it almost seems like the Wild West, because did anyone ask you about your PA license when you got off the plane? Did they ask you how many procedures you've done? Did they ask you, are you qualified to do this? They may or may not. And it's one of those things that people don't ask for your GPA, they don't ask for anything. They trust that you're down there to help them. And you kind of jump in as much as you want. You, down there, kind of do what you feel comfortable doing. You can learn a lot in these settings, because someone may not give you the tooth extractor in the United States if you don't have a dental license. But down there, you might be able to do this stuff. And it really helps people, because they don't have anyone else. So you may be elevated to a level of clinical treatment that you're not comfortable with, or maybe you're excited to do. You're learning. I think that's one of the great parts about these trips, is that anyone can go on these trips and learn a ton. But it is the Wild West, and so let's get the bad stuff out of the way. Malpractice. Almost no one gets sued on these trips. And so I wouldn't really even worry about it, but it just kind of comes up that, some people may ask, what should you carry any coverage, tail coverage? Should you worry about this stuff? Most of the literature is for surgeons who sometimes do $4 to $8 a day for some of these companies. But the chances are so small that most even organizations play it like a lottery and say the chances are almost zero that we're going to get dinged or anything like that. You're short term there, and the patients are so grateful, and it's just something that when I was going down to Tijuana, they some docs said, "I'll go with you, but what are you guys doing? You guys, what if something goes wrong? What are you covered?" And I guess down there, the church gets through the government in some sort of dispensation, saying you're doing charity work, and so you're okay. And for the most part, there's this thing called international humanitarian law. Now that's for healthcare workers and in war-torn areas. So that's sort of like, a medic, and the medic runs out in the battlefield, he doesn't get shot. And it also kind of protects you from the work that you're doing down there as well. So most organizations kind of run off this international humanitarian law. It's not been tested in court really. People have been sued before, but not for much. And it's something, the world is learning a lot from the United States, but unfortunately some of the bad things too as well, that we're a litigious society. And Americans come down there, well, there used to be It's not to scare you, but it's just something to keep in the back of your head. You know, what is, you know, it may be a question that the organization, you know, that you're going with, you ask them or they ask you, you know, will your hospital cover you? Some hospitals say you give them a month, you tell them about it, they'll cover you with a tail. So that's bad stuff. Let's get on to the good stuff. Transportation. Here's the plane that we were supposed to take to Haiti for the earthquake, and this looks like, I don't know, a big bumblebee. I don't know. It was a bizarre looking plane, but it would fit all that baggage we had, you know, all the bags. So you get sort of some odd planes. And, you know, so this, we flew all down to Fort Lauderdale, and we woke up in the morning, we got a call, we're all excited to go. And we only had like 7 days from work. I said, you gotta go and get this done and come home. And, you know, the day to travel to Fort Lauderdale and go over to Haiti. But we got a call, the landing gear's broken. Okay. We'll fix it within an hour. So an hour goes by, no, that's not broken. Actually, the fuel pump's broken too as well. Fuel pump. Landing gear, maybe we could sort of skid on our belly, but the fuel pump, that thing needs to be working. So it turned out they didn't have this thing working, and there, you were at an airport, and there happens to be a jet service that's just down the street. You know those executive jet services? And so we took our chances, and it was like a 1 in a million, you know, shot. And I said, I have to get to Port-au-Prince and get down to Haiti. So they could only take one, and so I shot over, and he said, the pilot is leaving in 5 minutes. You have to get on this plane. So I get on the plane in 5 minutes, and it wasn't a bad plane. You know, it's nice seats with pizza. I felt like I'd done pretty well, but there was a big reason why I had to get to Port-au-Prince, and I'll talk about the story. But once we got down there, you know, you're basically using any sort of transportation that's, you know, customary down there. You know, everywhere you go seems to have a Land Rover of some sort, piling all your stuff on there. We're going on a 6-hour journey to an orphanage from Port-au-Prince in this picture. This is a separate trip down there, and then. Usually the roads, not so good. And then, you know, this is in Haiti. Have you guys, anyone been to Haiti? Or? Yeah, this is like a tap or, this is like almost like a tap on steroids. This is, you know, this is just how they wrote. I mean, the PSV would have a field day down there. And, you know, it's funny, this tap taps, I actually, you know, I saw them on paper. You know that girl from Pakistan who just got shot? I mean, her Taliban, she was protesting. And he said she got shot in her school bus. And now, you know, we can see this like yellow bus or anything like that. And the school bus is just a pickup truck, a bench in the back. And I was just, wow, that's, you know, it's, you sort of have to break away from your paradigm of what, you know, certain things are down the transportation line. This is a buddy who just got back from a trip in the Amazon. And he said, this is such an amazing picture. They run out of, it was a low season, and they ran out of water. They didn't know that when they started heading down the river. And so everyone had to get out and had to push through this sort of segment of the Amazon River. There's a jungle in there. And all we know is that it has piranhas, right? That's all I can think of. The Amazon River's got piranhas. I do not set my foot there. Yeah. So this trip, you know, you don't know what's going to happen to your transportation. You might blow a tire, you might have to get out and post it in Amazon. But I thought this was sort of exemplifies that things can go a little crazy on these trips, and you just have to deal with it. And that's sort of what we do. We get away from the you know, divided highways that are safe and everyone travels 65. You go out for a little adventure, and this sort of captures adventure in the middle of nowhere. You know, all you got is the boats and yourselves, and that's about it. Security. Like I was talking about, you get these details down there sometimes. And sometimes they're the city cops. You know, it'd be like getting San Diego police to be your security, and you hire them, and you pay them some money, and they take care of you for the week, and they do what they do what you house security. They're your alarm system. Now, which guy would you want on your team? Would you want this guy or this guy? Yeah, okay, so you probably chose, he means business. So this is the box truck we traveled in down there. So just divide this line down the middle, and we went on one trip, and half of them didn't make it back. And not dead, but they just ended up not coming back in time for dinner. They said, well, where are they? And these guys, they got upset that they didn't get a tip on a really hot day. They got water and they were given stuff. But we would drive past this corner every day in Haiti, and they were being paid for the jobs, but they wanted some tip, something to get paid for. But they got pissed one day that they didn't get enough money from this lady who was paying them handsomely. Let's see, go back to her. This lady, Linda, right there. She was the coordinator. She's a saint. She lives in Colorado, but runs an orphanage down in Haiti. And so they arrested everyone in the truck, and they hauled them into a Haitian jail. And they said, well, we're going to hold you ransom until you pay us. And so this is like San Diego police taking, this is like trying logically, some laws are being broken or something, but down there, you got to realize that something's not being broken. They just don't have laws on this stuff. And so even though they look more official, they may not help you out as much. You got to be really careful. And it all, a lot of it comes down to money, who we pay, and how they respond to you, how you treat them. It's like you got to be just a little careful with the security detail. And usually the guys with the guns dressed in regular clothes and Michigan University hats are probably the ones you want to trust. This is from the U.S. Homeland Security website to Haiti. Should a traveler find himself or herself in an emergency, local health, police, judicial, or physical infrastructure limitations mean that travelers find themselves with few local resources available to help them to resolve their problem. And that just means that the embassy they don't go into towns after dark. The UN sometimes after midnight won't go into towns. And the police, like we talked about, they may or may not help you. And so one of the exciting parts about these trips is that you are kind of going into the Wild West, and you sort of have to be careful. You have to have your wits about you. You have to have some street smarts, which I think most people, want to be able to claim that they have some sort of street smarts, and you'll need some of that in some of these places, and not just go wandering off into the woods. And I want to say these alerts are true in certain circumstances, but I went to Egypt in like 2003 to see my brother. He was working as a teacher over there, and everyone said, "You're crazy. You're going to Egypt." And they're the nicest people, and it was such a wonderful trip, and not a single thing happened. I think for most people, you can get scared. It's even like going to Tijuana. You get scared about the news and these things, and you think you're going to go down there and get beheaded, and some cartel's going to take you and ask your family for ransom or something like that. But for the most part, you can go down to these places, and people do it every day. They travel these countries, they go on these trips, and everything's going to be fine. So I put this up more to show you that they have these strong warnings to protect themselves. But for the most part, I would say that your trips will go fine. You'll be meeting more than wonderful people in all these places. And though the security and all that stuff seems to scare people, I think in general, if you can land in, you'll be fine. Medications, like I said before, you may not have the certain drugs that you use to treat people. And reassurance and just caring for the people are a huge part. And we sometimes lose sight of it, because you can just, you cut down to appointment times. You need to see this person, treat them. Down there you may not have the medications or the things that sometimes make you happy. Oh, I'm going to refer you to this specialist, and you're like, oh, I'm going to refer to this specialist, and it makes me feel happy that even though I didn't get any medications, and you referred to someone I want to go see, and that makes you feel good. But sometimes you're the last person. You're going to be taking care of them. So you have as much of a moment as you can with these people, because it really helps them feel you're caring for them. where do you get medications? I mean, this is a headache that I learned early on when I started doing these trips, is that medications, don't fall from the sky. They're highly regulated in the United States, but there are some loopholes. There's some places you can go and they just give you medication. They give you boxes of it, they give you tons of it. You almost can't deal with the amount of medications that they give you. And they make it easy for you. They'll sometimes ship it to the country you're going to. They'll sometimes give you the actual seal of approval. And what's fantastic is that it gives you some armament when you're down there to treat people, and it's wonderful. Some guy gave me a bunch of meds from this Catholic medical missions board, and they get donations from GlaxoSmithKline. They get donations from Johnson & Johnson. They have tons of meds, and they'll make it easy for you. MAP International, I don't know if you've heard of these guys. Some of you might have heard of them, but they're also another crew that I'll show you a picture, but they basically have these travel packs, and they pack in about $14,000 in meds, and you give them a $500 donation. And it's usually really super helpful. They'll package it for you in a pack that you can carry, and they're an awesome organization. And that's what they kind of look like. There's two boxes. So we ended up getting 2 of them for this trip, just to stock the orphanage and take care of some of the medical needs. But they're like the football, the president has a guy with a briefcase that carries the codes for the nuclear bomb. He always has this briefcase on him. He never wants to lose his briefcase with codes, as they say. When you have these meds in these foreign countries, that's kind of like the football. You don't want to give them to anyone. You don't want to hold on to them. You don't want to give them to customs. Because that's what you've been delivering down there. So you try to take good care of them, but we still strive to do it.
Do airlines charge you for those extra boxes?
I went down there when they weren't charging, so it was okay. But I think nowadays it'd probably be charged. Yeah. Actually, I think I took these on as carry-ons. Like I put the duct tape on them as 2 handles, and they're kind of thinner. They're only about 12 inches, so they're kind of like carry-on size, so you can kind of walk in.
It's variable on that charge. I went to 80 last month, and we were initially told it was going to be $50 for every additional day. And we got there and said, we won't charge you. That was it.
The airport or the actual?